At this point, I'm hoping that you will have watched the video about the 5 predictors of early literacy. And I want to talk to you about how to apply that to a read aloud and what are children learning every time we read aloud to them. They're not learning all the things, they're learning some of it each time. And sometimes teachers that really know and understand that potential know when to focus on one thing versus another. So this is also going to tie into an artist investigation or how to build an artist investigation. One of the assignments or one of the components of your artist investigation is a literacy lesson plan. And I've tried to find artists that there really are great books online or to purchase. I've purchased them, believe me, my bank account knows. For the a children's book for the artist because I think it's such a dynamic way for children to learn about diverse people and to learn about and celebrate the different people that have done really cool things and to kind of learn about how that happened, what their journey was. So the other piece of this is The Radiant Child. This is about Basquiat, Jean-Michel Basquiat. This book has won 2 awards. That doesn't mean it's always going to be your favorite book, but it is something to look for when you're buying children's literature. This has the Caldecott for illustrations, and then also the Coretta Scott King Award, which can be a good sign for our anti-bias education for having books that demonstrate diversity. So we have our cover page. I might ask them, well, what do you think this book's going to be about based on what you see on the cover, even if they can't read, right? And they might say a young man, who knows, there's a flag, I don't know. There's not a lot on this one. But it's something to think about predictions and tying the illustrations to what we're with to our reading experience is an important comprehension skill for down the line. So this book is by Javaka Steptoe. It's called The Radiant Child. And it's the story of young artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. And we're going to learn about what kind of art he created and his process for creating it, and how, like, what his childhood was like that led him to become an artist. In the end pages, we see some of the symbols and things he uses in his art to represent different things. We might learn about what some of those mean as we read. This artwork is by the artist, the author, Javaka Steptoe. They tried to put themselves through the process that Basquiat did to create these illustrations. And Basquiat is known for using found items to paint on and collage work. He signs his work Samo, and now I'm like losing it for what that meant, but it's in the back of the book, so we'll see. All right. Somewhere in Brooklyn, between hearts that thump double dutch and hopscotch and salty mouths that slurp sweet ice, a little boy dreams of being a famous artist. In his house, you can tell a serious artist dwells as he sits at a table with pencils scattered everywhere. Jean Michel draws from morning until night with a serious face amid a storm of papers. He refuses to sleep until he has created a masterpiece. At night, images enchant Jean Michel's mind, and he wakes from his dreams to add one more line. His drawings are not neat or clean, nor does he color inside the lines. They are sloppy, ugly, and sometimes weird, but somehow still beautiful. His art comes from his mother, Mathilde, a Puerto Rican woman who designs and sews, cooks and cleans, and makes the house look like a stylish magazine. But most important, she lies on the floor and draws with Jean Michel on his father's old work papers. I'll stop doing that. From her, he learns that art is not only in the poetry books she reads to him or in the theaters and museums they visit. Art is the street games of little children in our style and the words that we speak. It is how the messy patchwork of the city creates new meaning for ordinary things. While visiting the museum, they look at his favorite works of art. Reading the story behind each work, this is how Jean Michel learns what it means to be a famous artist. Back at home, he creates art on the floor as his father Gerard plays jazz records. Mama Matilda cooks arroz con pollo and calls Jean Michel mi amor. The energy and life of the city can be felt in each line of his drawings. As time goes by, Jean Michel learns that art has a healing power. After a car accident, he is scared and confused, and Matilda gives him a book to calm his fears. It is filled with pictures of bones and skulls and other body parts. Jean Michel draws from it until he knows it all by heart, and he is no longer afraid. Back at home, Jean Michel's body heals, but his heart breaks. His mother's mind is not well, and the family breaks. She no longer lays on the floor and draws with Jean Michel, but sits by the window singing only to birds. Jean Michel is confused and filled with a terrible blues when Matilda can no longer live at home. He tries drawing the terrible out of his blues, but things are not the same. As Jean Michel grows older, he visits his mother when he can, always bringing his artwork to show, telling her that one day it will be in a museum when I am a famous artist. A teenager now, Jean Michel decides, Papa, I will be very, very famous one day. With a look, a twinkle in his eyes, Jean Michel leaves Brooklyn for New York City, the Lower East Side, a concrete jungle where only the tough survive. During the day, dressed in a green jumpsuit, splattered with paint, Jean Michel stays with friends, sleeping on couches and floors, leaving a barrage of collages and poem-filled papers everywhere he goes. At night, Jean Michel spray paints the walls downtown with poems and drawings that catch the eye of artists, gallery goers, and passerbys. Under his art, he signs the name Samo instead of Jean Michel. Everybody wants to know who is Samo. Samo moves from street corners to gallery walls with powerful color composition and line, collaging and painting on anything he can find. His art is still not neat or clean and definitely not inside the lines, but somehow still beautiful. With his magical charm, Jean Michel draws a crowd, but when it's time to work, he prefers to be alone, with the radio and TV on full blast. Now in expensive suits splattered with paint, he flips through stacks of magazines and open books, and paints into the night and sometimes for days at a time, while sounds and images jump into his head. Jean Michel, an artist among artists, never doubts one line, creating from a soundtrack that is all his own. Abuelita, 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 Snake, famous Negro athletes, Charlie Parker, Billie Holiday, Salt. People describe him as radiant wild, a genius child, but in his heart he is king, so he draws crowns for himself and others he admires. A grown man now with the art world in his hands, Michel still visits his mother when he can. And at his most important shows, above all the critics, fans, and artists, he admires the place of honor. His mother's a queen on a throne. He is now a famous artist. So in the back of the books, if you guys end up doing an artist that you can get a book for, or I'm able to lend it to you because you're local, they often have a little biography that's really helpful. And then Basquiat in his work does something with symbolism and motifs. So the crown is there, the eye, the cars, those skulls are often in his drawings. And this is actually great information, much better than Wikipedia. So if I was doing this with young children, I would talk about, okay, so what did we learn about Jean Michel? Well, he's from Brooklyn. He grew up in a family with a mother and father, and they listened to music and they created art, like as a family almost, right? And then some things did happen, and the mom had to go to get better. And this book does leave out some pretty tragic stuff that I would not really share with children. But at one point, the father actually thought he was ridiculous for saying he was going to be a famous artist and thought he should go to college and get a real job. And so he kicked him out and he was couch surfing. And if you ever get a chance to watch the Basquiat documentary, I think it's on Prime. I think I bought it. It was eye-opening. So he is a very eccentric young man. And there are very sad parts of his life that are not necessary to save with children, to share with children, but I think it's really his process seems to be that he likes to be alone. He uses whatever's available. He's not spending money per se on those supplies. He uses what he has access to. So he started off using the back of paper that was his father's, and then he just kept sketching and perfecting it. He also goes back to things. So I might tie it to the incubate, those four steps. I'm gonna have to look those up or else I'm not gonna get it right. But that he incubates. He would wake up and he'd be like, I gotta add this. So his work is very layered. And I think my favorite thing that I've discovered in this class is collage because I think I find it really relaxing and therapeutic. And I don't know where it's going, and I can just keep layering things on. And I find it just kind of magical personally. But so his process was that he would, be sketching. He would be adding his motifs and things. He's using found materials. He may add to it later. He has layers to it. And he does do some tagging outside. I don't know that the way it's presented in the book, it's not necessary that I go into that um, necessarily, but that is a part of his story. And then he does become discovered as a real trendy kind of thing, which isn't necessarily the best thing for him. If you watch the documentary, you'll see how he deals with this supposed fame. Um, but he lived a very short life, but I think he's made a very big impact. He really a lot of his artwork really speaks to the hypocrisy we have in society, to the idea of who should be famous or who should be in a gallery versus, you know, who's considered famous and who's considered worthy of purchasing. It's kind of like, I want to say political. It has a message, right? He did become good friends with Andy Warhol, which is kind of fascinating. Um, both very into their fame, you know? So I think that's about the process I would talk about. Like, so then if I was going to be doing the next step of that, I'd be sharing like an anchor chart of found materials. I can see my dogs in the background. That's great. That's Esme. Found materials that they could use for their collages. And it's almost That's it. Thank you. I will continue later. Really, dudes, this is why you're downstairs when I'm doing this. Dude.